Hey guys, welcome back. And in today's episode, the topic I want to introduce was, as suggested by the title, the fact that many UFO sightings perhaps aren't quite as extraterrestrial as we think. Indeed, they are UFOs, unidentified flying objects, stuff that, in the strictest sense of the word, haven't been identified yet. But this doesn't mean to say that they can't be of man-made origin.
Okay, so first off, I actually wanted to start out with the first point of technology could actually be so far ahead, certainly in military circles, that it's potentially beyond our current comprehension, and certainly beyond the average person's current understanding of technology and where it's actually currently at. And just to kind of demonstrate this point, I thought it'd be a good idea to actually run over things like the SR-71 Blackbird and the B-2 stealth bomber, for instance. Now, the SR-71 Blackbird, you might know this plane. It's probably one of perhaps the most famous plane in history. Currently, still holding the record for fastest manned aircraft. And well, this thing's engine was actually first tested in 1958. This is how old it is. At a time when people perhaps probably thought of military aircraft certainly as Spitfires, Lancaster bombers, Mustangs. I mean, jet technology was in its early stages and was known about. But imagine if you'd seen that in the sky for the first time in the '60s when it was first tested. You're gonna think, "What on earth is that?" And perhaps may come to conclusions that indeed this thing could be of another world. And in addition to this, you've also got the B-2 stealth bomber, which perhaps wasn't as far ahead of its time as the SR-71 Blackbird in certainly performance and how fast it could go, but the incredibly unique shape of this plane, specifically made to be completely invisible to enemy radar, again, was just like unlike anything that had really been seen before, certainly by the general population. Obviously, the triangular shaped craft didn't have any wings like a kind of standard plane does, as they can make it more visible to radar. And again, people could draw the same conclusions as they perhaps would do with the SR-71 Blackbird. So, I mean, I think the next thing to think about is if this stuff that's being sighted currently in the skies over planet Earth is actually of this world, then, I mean, what are the candidates for what it could be? I mean, the first thing you can look to is the alleged Aurora project. This is being spoken about in kind of, I mean, you can go and look this up, it's been spoken about extensively elsewhere. But kind of proof of this relates to many sonic booms that were being heard over California, actually causing slight geological activity and being measured on the Richter scale, that were often only felt when space shuttles were being launched, and these registerings on the Richter scale weren't anything to do with space shuttles being launched, as there weren't any launched at the time of the time these geological events were measured. Other things are, there was actually a paper released by the UK government entitled Exotic Technologies, which acknowledged that the US government is actually putting a lot of time and money into the development of hypersonic aircraft, and it's one of their main focuses, and certainly on piloted aircrafts as well, and trans-atmospheric vehicles, which should be able to operate within the Mach 4 to 6 range. And also, there's been other sightings. For example, one of the most famous sightings of an unregistered aircraft, and this was over British airspace, was by Chris Gibson, a Scottish oil explorer, who was part of the British Royal Observer Corps, the ROC. So he was trained to be able to instantly recognise any aircraft that he saw, and he sighted over the North Sea when he was working on a oil rig. He sighted 4 planes, so one he recognised as a KC-135 Stratotanker alongside 2 F-111s. However, these aircraft, the known aircraft that he recognised, were flanking some sort of, he couldn't identify it. He said it was a pure isosceles triangle, and it was actually refuelling from the Stratotanker. But this is a train a trained spotter, and he couldn't identify what this plane was. I mean, the presence of other known aircraft on the US military actually, in a way, do prove that it's something that's known to the US government. It is under development, but he just had no idea of what it was. I mean, how was the average person supposed to be able to recognise these craft and say, yeah, that's something our government uses if trained spotters can't? I mean, all this could point to the Aurora project, and that it is actually something that's real under development. Although it's been a room that's been around for a very long time now, and I think the length of time it's been about has kind of doused the flames of whether or not it's real. I mean, especially to me, because I think it's just been around for so long, conjectured about for so long, that I don't think the Aurora project is something that's real. But I mean, certainly a lot more in the open is the SR-72 spy plane that's currently being developed. And this is something you can go and look up. It's not particularly a super secret thing. It's something Lockheed Martin have at least conceptualized, should I say. And we'll actually be able to succeed, should I say, the retired Lockheed SR-71 Blackbird. As the US government now does have a need for UAV reconnaissance as potential enemy actors, states, terrorist organisations have got very good at covering the tracks up from satellite imagery. So they're going to have to kind of go back and use spy planes again. So there is a need for faster planes, UAV reconnaissance aircraft now. So I mean, indeed, it could be these sorts of things that are actually being spotted in the skies above. I mean, above the world, really, not just America, not just the UK. Right, so point number 2 that I wanted to make was, a lot of people might ask, well, why is there so much secrecy around these aircraft? Like, in a way, why doesn't the governments flaunt it in a way to show how much more powerful we are than perhaps Russia, China, and that NATO, the US, can reign supreme if push comes to shove. And there's one thing I wanted to bring up with regards to this so point number 2 is the black budget. Now, the black budget's something that, if you don't know about it, it's a very large sum of money, federal money, which goes into programs and is largely on the whole unscrutinised, gets sheltered from any congressional oversight, for instance. And there's a few instances of looking back at previous programs why, if the military does want to innovate in terms of the technologies it does have, why it might want to make a lot of this stuff, to be funded by black budgets. And one article I want to touch on was actually back with the B-2 stealth bomber, back in 1991. So this article's from the New York Times, and at the time of publication of this article in 1991, the B-2 stealth bomber had just failed a key test in that it wasn't quite as undetectable as Northrop Grumman had made out. And in this article, Senator Jim Exxon, he kind of led a campaign to withdraw funding and support for the program if they didn't get their act together. And you could imagine that maybe this is a sort of pressure that when we are dealing with very exotic, very innovative, literally cutting-edge technologies, maybe the scientists working on these don't perhaps want that level of oversight, where if they start failing tests and they get the funding pulled, for instance, so therefore they'd much rather conceal these programs within a black budget and keep them hidden away from the public eye, really. And as well, relating to the issue of the black budget, I found a really interesting article named "The Dark Secret of the Black Budget," aptly enough. And this one was actually from 1987. So I think we're seeing a common theme here of that period in time when Reagan was really ramping up the amount of money that was being put into that particular black budget, to rid it of any sort of oversight. And there's this article which actually states by a man called Thomas Aimley, a civilian who worked for the Air Force, financial watchdog. And he said there's 3 reasons for having black projects in this article. So 1, you're doing something genuinely top secret, which should be suppressed and kept out of the public eye for a genuine reason. But he says that's few and far between. The other reason is you're doing something so damn stupid, in his own words, you don't want anyone to know about it. And 3, you want to rip the money bag open and get out a shovel because there's no accountability whatsoever. And again, this might be another thing about why these projects are suppressed, because I think that there could be big public outcry if maybe Congress did get hold of these budgets and saw how much waste actually did occur. Certainly in times when governments are talking about cutting spending, particularly to certain bits of the public sector, these ramp ups in military spending might get harder and harder to justify, and therefore they are put into the block budget to avoid those problems. And again, why these programs are kept top secret, and why they aren't kind of widely flaunted by the government because of the costs involved. And really, we can see this sort of thing continuing to this day. As only in March 2019, President Trump has requested a spending rise of the black budget to nearly $86 billion, a 6% increase on the year before. So I think this is going to be the largest ever black budget in US government history. And he's laid down the proposal as being to challenge China and Russia. However, you just got to think $86 billion. This is serious money, and this could be used to fund projects which could be looking into technologies that are just light years ahead of what we already know. And if these are indeed being put into, this money is being kind of thrown at the aircraft that's being developed and built by various agencies, and indeed these aircraft then being tested in the skies above America, maybe above Europe, and being spotted. You know, these could be something like can't even really comprehend just yet as a civilian. So it kind of explains, looking at the figures, why technology could be way ahead of where we currently are as a civilian population, but also why there is so much secrecy around it, because, you know, there's going to be a lot of waste and a lot of misuse of public funds within these black programs, which could potentially cause issues for those vested interests in these government agencies, explaining the secrecy around it as well. And I think we have to consider as well that a lot of these aircraft that are being sighted may not even be property of the US government, or indeed a NATO affiliated government. We could potentially be looking at enemy aircraft here, perhaps belonging to Russia, China, as nations in their own right. They throw serious money at their militaries, so we do have to consider this as an option. I mean, let's take for instance China. As recently as 2018, it's been developing a aircraft called Starry Sky 2, and this is a hypersonic aircraft which is designed to carry nukes should the situation ever arise. And well, it would be a great way to test it, wouldn't it, if you were to fly it over enemy airspace, just to see how well it can evade detection and can evade counter strikes and radar, and especially with a totalitarian government like China, it would be able to suppress information much easier than the US government can, for instance, and keep any of its top secret projects much more top secret than perhaps we could in the West, due to their ability to suppress information. And this is something we always have to consider. You know, maybe we're reaching a point in time when, well, not necessarily their enemies, but potential enemies are surpassing us in terms of their military technology. I mean, China, Russia, they've got plenty of space to test these things out. We know they do pour a lot of money into their military, so this isn't something that can particularly be ruled out either.
Okay, so just to conclude, I think I just want to kind of quickly run over the points again from what I made in this video. So first of all, the fact that UFO sightings, I mean, those that are reporting them could be genuinely thinking these are of extraterrestrial origin. However, we have to deal with the possibility that current military technology is way beyond anything that we know about. And therefore, that's where the confusion can sometimes arise from, because these people could be seeing stuff that's just kind of not even in our current imagination as a population. Secondly, I kind of just wanted to go over the idea of the black budget and how politically contentious that can potentially be, which again goes to further explain why so much secrecy is placed around these black projects, and why the government might be so keen to cover these things up. So it's not like they're hiding anything, like they've got aliens locked away or anything. It's simply that there could be a lot of political uproar if the amount of money that they are spending on these projects is discovered and revealed to the relevant scrutiny, or relevant congressional scrutiny bodies. And finally, I think we have to deal with certainly the issue that China is growing in power, military might, and itself could be jumping out of the West and creating aircraft that exceed anything we currently have. As you know, they're growing in power, they're growing in strength, certainly growing in clout in terms of money, that the money that they have to spend on their military. So something we can't rule out either. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and hope to see you again for my next one.